And welcome back, everybody. We are here. The moment is here, of course, the fourth stream match and final one. I myself am Custody Demos, joined by Maeve. Sorry, I got the runway. By Maeve O'Rourke, of course. So we're here for a very, very exciting final match between Spain and Italy. Just for confirmations, there is not going to be a Spanish Victory Road stream immediately after this that they do commonly do, unfortunately. So the results will be up and ready for us to examine, and of course this will be the stream match for today.
Yeah, and this stream is really exciting because we have Alex. We have Alex Gómez here for Spain's side, which is, one of those trainers that, a big part of Victory Road himself, which is, very exciting to see. But he's incredibly talented, and both of these teams are really nice as well. So I'd like when we jump over, I'm sure, to the scoring for both of them, we'll see exactly how the teams shape up, and it is 5-2. So Spain has already taken the win on this one. So Italy probably just trying to secure whatever last point it can if it needs to. One thing I love is I'm not seeing full line of Incineroar, a lot of Entei that I'm showing as well, and Dragapult, something I'm loving here, but very standard, I think, restricted selections except for Lunala.
Yeah, and you can tell that all of these players have such recognizable names because they are absolute veterans when it comes to VGC. You've got a lot of quality, a lot of weight of achievements as well. So it's very, very interesting and exciting every time to actually go ahead and check out how they actually match up with one another. I do see a Lunala and Sylvie on a Raquinade team as well, which I do feel like I've seen on an Italian stream somewhere. So that was exciting, must have been exciting to see. But of course, we've got Alex, Gómez, Rocky, the Zacian, Incineroar, Rillaboom, Cantonian Zapdos, Nihilego, and maybe an Urshifu Rapid Strike. His achievements are not... I mean, come on, they're right there. He's got great achievements. Everybody knows him. He is a very, very well-respected icon in the VGC community.
Yeah, I love the fact that we have to say Cantonian Zapdos now. That's something that, I never thought I'd be saying, but Zapdos, one of those Pokemon that is actually really good now in Series 10. It wasn't, it kind of faded in and out, obviously, but Zapdos is one of those Pokemon that can be really offensive and get some really strong, Electro-type moves onto something like if you're playing against a Kyogre. Once again, we have that maybe a Fire Water Grass core. I am not going to speak too soon here. So it should be, that Rillaboom and Incineroar, very standard. The Zacian as well, a Pokemon we're seeing a lot right now, probably one of the most common restricteds. And then the Nihilego, and we've seen a bunch of Nihilego today.
Yeah, a bunch of Nihilego, of course. Just fitting quite well in the current meta, as well as we're going to be going over to his opponent's player profile for today, Kevin Salvetto, which is going to be rocking a Zacian of their own, Volcarona, that Rillaboom 2, Landorus Therian, Urshifu Single Strike, and the Milotic, Maeve.
I am excited about this Milotic. We talked about this before we came on. I actually wore a Milotic pin today, completely just coincidental. The Pokemon on this team I love. Volcarona is one of my favorites for this team, for this series. It's almost like a really strong Amoonguss. It still gets access to Rage Powder. Quiver Dance is a really good move. I love the Intimidate here with the Landorus and with the Landorus Therian, because you don't have that Incineroar on your team. Your only fake out user is your Rillaboom. But this Milotic could be one of two sets, typically, maybe three. We're worried that it's Coil Hypnosis. That would be... that is a Pokemon that can be absolutely devastating if it gets fully set up. That Coil, even with a Muddy Water, can be really tough, especially if you're dealing with those accuracy drops. Can make it a really tough Pokemon to deal with and even hit back if it does get you with that accuracy drop. Could also just be that very bulky kind of wall like Milotic with the Recover and, with a Muddy Water or a Scald or an Ice Beam even.
Well, yeah, that's the thing about Milotic. It's got different variants of sets that you could be running for it. If it is the Coil set, I'm just going to put a disclaimer right now. It may be a bit of a lengthy game, ladies and gents, so sit tight. The action will still be amazing from both these veterans of VGC, as we're going to go ahead and get straight into the action, as we are going to be checking it out from Alex's point of view. Apologies, there's no team preview, but this is turn 1 of game 1, and we see the leads of Zapdos, Urshifu, versus Zacian and the Milotic on Kevin's side.
Yeah, Milotic coming out immediately, not loving facing the Zapdos, I think, but I'm very interested to see exactly what it's going to do here.
Well, yeah, exactly that. You're in a situation where Zapdos, unfortunately, does no longer have access to Tailwind as of this gen, of course. Urshifu, on the other hand, is in a really good spot. A lot of sets now do run that Mystic Water item, which most of them, of course, are trained, so it could try to land a 2-hit KO onto Zacians on certain builds too. As oh wait, no, we're just gonna see Milotic go for something.
My goodness!
A helping hand.
Yeah, helping hand Milotic here. Zacian going for that Behemoth Blade into either of these two Pokemon. It's going to be absolutely massive amount of damage. It is that Zapdos in the very first turn, though. Even with the helping hand, it still only does about 50% of its health because it's not a very effective move, and it is hurt by a Rocky Helmet item that Zapdos is carrying. Surging Strikes here from Urshifu as well, going into the Zacian, and we know that does a lot of damage. If you don't have a great Zacian answer, that Urshifu can sometimes be your best bet just to chip away at the HP that Zacian has.
I love that play right now, as of course the Thunderbolt does come out from the Zapdos whilst they try to target down the Milotic, and does actually guarantee a near 2-hit KO whilst we get a reveal of leftovers on Milotic too.
Yeah, one of those bulky Pokemon, and that leftovers I think is really going to help here as well. But like you said, I love that Urshifu play, and I really think it's interesting that this Milotic is the helping hand variant. It's a really nice partner for this Zacian as well.
Well, yeah, I'm quite happy that it's not coiled, to be honest, but that's just my personal opinion. As, of course, the Rocky Helmet interaction, the Zacian incurring that damage as well dealt from it, is quite detrimental. You see Zapdos, it had a chance to actually get its ability proc, the static ability, which meant that the Zacian could have been paralyzed, which would have been so unfortunate for Kevin's side of the field. But at this point, the Zapdos, apologies, is within range of getting KO'd. Whether the Milotic does go for another helping hand or not, but in this situation, it may be indicative as well that this Zacian might not be running a play rough moveset that we've been seeing prop up more in the current meta, as the Milotic actually switches out for the Landorus now.
Yeah, Landorus comes out getting an Intimidate off onto both of these Pokemon. The only one that's really going to mind that here is going to be that Urshifu. Another thing too is Zapdos goes for that Protect, so it's not going to be taking any helping hand damage. Hopefully the Zacian went for something into the Urshifu, but it did not. That Behemoth Blade went back into the Zapdos here, and the Surging Strikes once again from this Urshifu. This should be enough to comfortably knock out this Zacian here. That should not be able to live past, I think, even 2 of them. So that is a really huge turn for Alex here, and you have to be really proud of the fact that he's not bringing in something like that Incineroar, knowing that Intimidate could proc that competitive ability as well on that Milotic and make it really annoying.
Exactly that, and I think I really am liking Alex's plays right here. He's playing quite slowly, quite calmly. He does have that Protect on the Zapdos too, and he was able to go ahead and just pick off Kevin's Restricted, being that Zacian quite comfortably. We know Milotic is in the back. Volcarona has now come onto the field. It does threaten that Urshifu with any Flame Body procs, which may have a chance to burn that Urshifu. Well, I mean, 3 chances, as if the Surging Strikes does come out, of course, onto the target. As we do know, Urshifu right now highly threatens both the Volcarona and Landorus. I would potentially maybe safeguard the Urshifu a bit if I were Alex, but then it all depends on what other Pokemon he does eventually have in the back too.
Volcarona does its setup here, goes for that Quiver Dance, which is such a great move to get your special attack raise and your special defense and your speed. It is a huge move that only Volcarona and a couple of other bug types get. The Surging Strikes, though, is going to go into that Volcarona. You have such a good chance of getting burnt here. None on the first. Are we getting any on the second? I do not believe so, but we do get the berry proc here. So if this is a berry that is going to you know, bring it back up, and I don't know if that's going to be enough. It's going to be really close. It is not enough to survive even with that berry. You need one of those burns to proc there, or else you're not going to be able to survive with that Flame Body ability. Zapdos goes for a Roost here. That Roost will bring up 50% of its HP. It will ground it this turn, though, so if this Landorus went for anything really fancy, like an Earth Power into the Zapdos slot, but it did not, so the Landorus goes for an Earth Power into the Urshifu slot here.
Yeah, and I think in this situation, of course, it's quite tough for Kevin, because there are so many chances right there, those 3 chances for the Urshifu to be burned. If only one burn was able to land, should I say, any one of those hits, that Volcarona would have been surviving, and then immediately after would have been outspeeding as well. So quite fortunate for Alex there, but then again, he went for the risk. He said, okay, there's a chance that this Volcarona could even be a setup Volcarona. I don't want to risk it. I want to try to guarantee that I'm able to get whatever damage I can onto it, as he did so quite well.
Yeah, the Surging Strikes once again from this Urshifu. This is just being so oppressive, getting more damage off onto this Landorus, which is just going to get hurt by the Rocky Helmet, though, which is really huge damage. If this hits 3 times, which it will, just based on the accuracy of the move, obviously, gets that Landorus knockout, but does a massive amount of Rocky Helmet damage onto the Urshifu here. If this Milotic goes for something like a Muddy Water, you know, it may be able to get the knockout here, but it really depends on if it's able to, you know, power through the Urshifu. The Icy Wind of the Avoid here from the Milotic as well is absolutely massive, but an Icy Wind onto both of these Pokemon, slowing them both down just 1 stage.
Yeah, I found it quite interesting that Alex didn't want to try to go for Thunderbolt there. He took into consideration if, for whatever reason, that Landorus could actually survive the Surging Strikes there, to try to guarantee that double up onto the Landorus, finally get rid of it, and pave out the road for this endgame against Milotic, as at this point, Alex has played phenomenally well. He's got a lot of resources, and Kevin's just down to his 1 Pokemon.
I mean, I love Milotic as a Pokemon. I don't think it has a really great chance here, you know, especially if it's only running 1 type of offensive move. And if it is something like Muddy Water, which can miss, you know, it's going to be something really tough. It is actually going to use Scald here, though, maybe fishing for some sort of burn on the Zacian to get rid of that Intrepid Sword boost. But instead, a Thunderbolt here from the Zapdos is not enough to finish it off, actually. And then the leftovers will get it back some of its much-needed HP, but I don't believe it's going to make it another turn.
No, unfortunately not. So Kevin, I think, is just gonna have to try to think about his game 2 plan right now going into this. As we just saw that, unfortunately for himself, Alex was just able to just run away with this Urshifu, and you need to try to find a better way to shut it down. Sure, you do have the Volcarona. It could have been used as an option, of course, in trying to proc a Flame Body there, get a burn, but it wasn't able to get either of those. Alex got quite lucky there, but I think I would really much prefer seeing the Rillaboom used.
Yeah, that was actually my thought as well. I feel like the Rillaboom could be really helpful here in dealing with that Urshifu, because that Urshifu was so oppressive to every Pokemon on his side. You know, that Volcarona is a Pokemon that is a really great counter for Zacian, sorry, for Zacian itself. But if you aren't able to capitalize on it after you set that Quiver Dance up, and you don't get the lucky, you know, the burn is, I believe, almost 2/3 chance to get burned with those Flame Bodies, if my math is right. I could be wrong, but, you know, going with a 30-something% chance of not getting that burn can be really tough, can be a little heartbreaking. But even then, you know, you shouldn't be relying on just getting a burn, especially if you've got a Pokemon like Rillaboom that you didn't bring, and you know Rillaboom can be so powerful with an extra Fake Out, and with that Grassy Glide, and just the constant pressure onto the Urshifu.
Well, exactly that, and I think if you are going to be considering bringing the Rillaboom, I could understand Kevin's side, because it's a bit awkward, because there are a couple of threats over on Alex's side that he could try to go and potentially shut down the Rillaboom if possible. You know, you've got the Nihilego, you do have the Zapdos, which does have access, of course, to that Hurricane that we did actually take note of. The Rocky Helmet being on the Zapdos is very, very nice. We've been seeing it pop up quite recently as well. It acts quite well against Zacians mainly, or even in this situation against, you know, like opposing Urshifus and anything, essentially. You just want to try to break any Focus Sash that you can and try to exert a lot of pressure with the Zapdos, as you do have that recovery available to it too.
Yeah, and I loved the Rocky Helmet as well on the opponent's side there, because it was able to do so much damage to that Urshifu, and that was really the only way that they had to combat it. You know, if that Urshifu was so oppressive, if the only way to deal with it was to take all of that Rocky Helmet damage itself and then find a way to finish it off afterwards. But I don't think that that's something you can really, you know, forget about as well, because that Urshifu, if it is so problematic, if you have to, you know, sack a Pokemon maybe to get something in for free, you might want to make sure that it's something with that Rocky Helmet damage, you know, just especially with the Surging Strikes where it gets hit 3 times. But instead we see the Rillaboom and the Volcarona, so definitely a change here with Fake Out pressure and redirection with the Urshifu and Zapdos once again.
There we go. There is the answer that Kevin needed to this Urshifu Rapid Strike on Alex's side being such a bother for his team. It just goes straight through his team if he doesn't bring this Rillaboom. So I do really like the adaptation here, as well as having the Volcarona is quite nice, because you do have the potential of going for the Quiver Dance or even Fake Out play right here. But this is all going to be mind games right now, Maeve, as Alex can easily switch either of his Pokemon now, anticipating the Fake Out slot, and maybe even try to go for a very risky, inaccurate Hurricane on either of Kevin's Pokemon.
Yeah, you really have to be careful of which one you go for that fake out on, right? If you go for the Zapdos, you deal with the Surging Strikes. If you go for the Urshifu, you deal with the possibility of a Hurricane. Obviously, I think the Hurricane is the safer bet because there is a chance it can miss because you are not in the rain. But it's definitely something you still have to be mindful of as well. So we do get that fake out onto the Urshifu. Volcarona goes for that Quiver Dance, going to boost those 3 stats that it so desperately loves to have that boost for: the special attack, the special defense, and the speed, and going to make it faster. And then we also have the Hurricane from the Zapdos. It does connect though onto the Volcarona, but the Volcarona sits pretty comfortably with only half of its damage lost there, and it does eat that Citrus Berry.
Yeah, and no confusion as well, worthy to note there, ladies and gents. We're going to be seeing Volcarona regain nearly back up to full HP thanks to both the Citrus Berry proc and that Grassy Terrain recovery over time. Very good situation for Kevin here. He's able to put out the pressure, which is exactly what he needed to do now, as he can still threaten the Urshifu. As we see Zapdos switching out right now for the Incineroar.
Yeah, Incineroar, I think, going to be nice to get that fake out pressure onto this Volcarona later, especially if he wants to go for something like a Surging Strikes, but that does mean that he's got a pretty free target here. The Detect here from the Urshifu, not going to want to take any sort of Grassy Glide damage like we are seeing right now. That does go into the Protect from the Rillaboom on Kevin's side. Volcarona goes for a Struggle Bug also into the Urshifu slot, so that double target means that it was a very safe, that double Protector was a very safe play, but it does get that little bit of damage and that special attack drop, which Incineroar doesn't very much mind, but it is nice to get a little bit of damage and some HP back without getting hurt this turn for that Volcarona.
I do really like Alex's positioning right here because he's able to still threaten that Volcarona whilst having Incineroar on the field. Being able to exert that fake out pressure is completely necessary in this scenario, as Volcarona may not even be carrying that Protect, as I have seen quite a few Volcarona sets just run Quiver Dance, Struggle Bud, either Flamethrower or Heat Wave, and then Rage Powder, because it just makes a lot of sense to it. You want to try to utilize as much as possible from this Pokemon's great move pool. And Rillaboom in a bit of an awkward spot because it's probably going to get faked out here. The Volcarona is threatened by that Urshifu, so it may come down to a switch out, or if there's any sort of Flame Body proc that can be activated on this Volcarona.
The Rillaboom actually does switch out here, though. Zacian comes in for Kevin, so not worrying too much about getting that Rillaboom faked out, especially if it is Zacian there, especially without that Intimidate to come in and lower that Intrepid Sword boost that it just got. The fake out from this Incineroar actually goes into the Zacian slot here, not into the Volcarona, so Volcarona will go for that Struggle Bug once again, do a good bit of damage to both of these Pokemon, just a small amount, but it is enough if that Urshifu could possibly, you know, it isn't this time, obviously, because we know what the item is, but if it was holding something like a Focus Sash to break it, that Surging Strikes, though, does come out from the Urshifu here, going to do a ton of damage. No burn on one. Yes, one burn. So that is going to be huge, but I almost wonder if there was just enough chip damage on this Volcarona to keep it alive in the first place, but it's going to come down really close, and it does survive with that Quiver Dance and with that burn. So a huge live from that Volcarona, getting that burn on the very first Surging Strikes.
Yeah, and I find it quite incredible. That is what Kevin needed to do, to at least still have Volcarona active and still being a threat on his side of the field. Of course, I may have liked if there was any sort of Milotic over on Kevin's side, a switch out of the Volcarona into that, because I feel like Volcarona has a very good position against Alex's Pokemon, as long as it is maybe get a Quiver Dance up, or still does have options with that Rage Powder. So yes, of course, the Volcarona could maybe go for an attack right now, but it may still be threatened by an Aqua Jet from the Urshifu too.
Yeah, that Urshifu priority move means that this Volcarona here is going to switch out, bring that Rillaboom in. Not going to want to deal with anything coming from this Urshifu. You have to know what that threat is. Aqua Jet does go into that Rillaboom slot, does a very small amount of damage, which would have very easily taken out the Volcarona there, but a close combat from the Zacian is enough to knock out the Incineroar, get rid of that Intimidate, get rid of that fake out from that Pokemon. Yeah. You know, if he has that Rillaboom in the back, Alex, he could still have more fake out pressure, but losing that Intimidate is massive, especially for the Zacian to start, you know, racking up some big hits without worrying about its Intrepid Sword being lost.
Yeah, and this is it. I do really like the positioning right now. I feel like a bit one turn late for me, perhaps, but it still was, still did occur. Of course, the Volcarona was switched out now for that Rillaboom. Rillaboom's able to go ahead and exert a lot of pressure, accompanied by that Zacian. Sure, Zacian was able to checkmate that Incineroar in that situation. No more Intimidates out, like you mentioned, Maeve, as Alex has a couple of options right now. It's still nowhere near over. It's all based on any potential speed interactions, or if you could maybe get any sort of status, as Urshifu is quite affected due to that burn. It's not going to be able to get as much damage output as it would have liked. It is kind of stuck against this Rillaboom, a bit useless right now for Alex's side. The only use I could see for it is for that Aqua Jet against the Volcarona. But we do see Zapdos coming on the field though.
Yeah, Zapdos comes in here, which is not really going to love getting a Thunderbolt into either of these two. It would much more be comfortable with a Hurricane, maybe into this Rillaboom slot. I think it's going to still probably kind of come down to what this Urshifu can do. If it can get that chip damage as well onto the Zacian like it got in that last game, which made it so much more effective. But the Grassy Glide instead into this burnt Urshifu is not enough to knock it out, just brings it down to 6 HP. Zacian goes for a Substitute, which I absolutely love here. Gonna still be taking some Surging Strike damage, still take those 3 hits. Gonna try and break this Substitute within the first 1 or 2 of them, just so that you can get a little bit more chip damage onto this Zacian. Not a Substitute fade on the second one, but it will fade on the first one, but it will fade on the second one here, so it will take 1 more Surging Strikes, just a little bit of damage there, but it is still a pretty good play with that Substitute, knowing that you can't go for that Protect in front of the Urshifu, and a Thunderbolt from the Zapdos goes into the Zacian, not enough to get the knockout there.
Oh, but I agree with you. I think that was a great play from what Alex could do in that scenario. With a burnt Urshifu, you want to not allow this Zacian to try to get away with any sort of plans that it may be strategizing about, like that Substitute. You want to try to limit it as best as possible. From Alex's side, you do still have some sort of pressure, at least, with the Thunderbolt from the Zapdos. Maybe even a Hurricane here in anticipation of Kevin's switching of the Landorus.
Yeah, Landorus getting that Intimidate off into this Urshifu, who is already burned and is not going to be doing a whole lot if a Grassy Glide comes out right here. But it does go for a Surging Strikes, though. Going to do a pretty good chunk of damage if this is onto the Landorus, and it is, but it will take that Rocky Helmet, chip damage, and get hurt and only get 1 single Surging Strikes off. So a really great switch in there, preventing that Urshifu from doing anything really tough for it. And the Zapdos goes for a Hurricane, which does connect into the Rillaboom. That is almost enough for a knockout there. I wonder if it was bred specifically for that, but it was a critical hit, so that is very scary. The knockoff, though, for that Rocky Helmet is a move I really like, but the static is very tough, paralyzing that Rillaboom, making it going to make it go slower, especially now that that grassy terrain is off the field, and it takes that last bit of Rocky Helmet chip. Because of that critical hit, it is knocked out by that Zapdos.
Yeah, and this actually changes the game quite significantly. The Rillaboom would have still been in play, maybe for any future fake outs, perhaps, which could have really helped out. The Landorus is now on the field. It has taken damage from even a burnt Urshifu there. I feel like maybe trying to make sure that not allowing the Landorus to take that damage may have been a bit of priority there. Of course, the Rillaboom there did knock off the Rocky Helmet of that Zapdos, so, and we saw, of course, it was self-inflicted down to the KO due to that. Kevin does still have options to go for. It's 3 versus 2 against Alex's, with the Volcarona, though, being quite low in HP. I feel like a lot of momentum, speed-wise, is on Alex's side. As long as maybe he can land a hit, I feel like it's a very safe play, though, going for Behemoth Blade into the Landorus, try to guarantee a KO there, unless it's a Choice Scarf, and with the Zapdos, just try to target down the Volcarona with the Thunderbolt when it's at such low HP range.
Yeah, you definitely don't need to try for a Hurricane there, knowing that it can have that effect of missing. This Landorus, I think it's only, it's probably going to have to try and go for something like Rock Slides, maybe get those flinches, get some good damage down onto the Zapdos, but we will have to see exactly what it does here. Zacian goes for that Substitute, another Substitute Zacian here, this time on Alex's side, which is a great move. Fiery Dance, though, from the Volcarona will probably go right into that Substitute and break it, but it will not be doing any damage to the Zacian behind it, which is very nice for Alex, knowing that if he can get enough damage off from his Zapdos this turn to knock that Volcarona out, he's going to be in a much more comfortable position, which that Thunderbolt does do. That accurate move, another critical hit there. Not that it mattered, but I think just for style at this point. So the Landorus actually goes for a Stone Edge here into the Zapdos. Doesn't do a whole lot of damage here, though. Not enough to bring it even down into its bottom 25% of its HP.
Yeah, I think I do really like the fact that Kevin, of course, just tried to go for what he could. Went for the fiery dance, as we had seen in the previous game, the interaction of the Volcarona actually being trained to be faster than the Zapdos on Alex's side of the field. But a bit of a missed opportunity, personally, I would say. You could have been going for the Behemoth Blade. Maybe it was to just try to guarantee that there's no reason, no way, shape, or form for that Volcarona to pick up any sort of KO, whether due to crit or not, onto the Zacian. So still highly respected there. And this situation is going to be coming down to speed tie potential between the Zacians. Of course, the Zacian on Kevin's side is at such low HP, it will be going down to any hit that will be connected to it other than maybe a Hurricane. But in this scenario, I think you just need to try to hope for the faster Zacian, as they don't always now in the current meta run full speed sets, actually.
Yeah, that's something that you do see. They don't always run full speed, but the Behemoth Blade here, I could not tell exactly which side this was on. I do believe this is Kevin's, though, and it is. So Kevin's gets that Behemoth Blade off onto the Zapdos before that Zapdos can go for something like a Roost and get that recovery, but it does get another static for good measure. Alex really just hitting all of those today, and he does get that Rocky Helmet chip damage, so that knockoff didn't actually work there because it was knocked out by its own volition there. But the Behemoth Blade now from Alex's Pokemon going into the Landorus on Kevin's, it does not get knocked out, brings it to just above about probably 30% of its health, and it does get that Rocky Helmet damage as well. Landorus goes for an Earth Power here. This is going to be not enough to knock it out, though, so you have to know, I think Kevin has this game right now. This Alex can only attack one of the Pokemon here. You have to hope for Zacian to get paralyzed and to take down this Landorus, because you know you're faster than it, and you know this Zacian's going to be slower than you.
And the awkward thing is, I think Kevin's game plan right now is to hope for no paralysis, whilst Alex is hoping for that fully paralyzed state right now for the Zacian. If Zacian does get fully paralyzed, of course, that means that Alex will be able to go ahead and target down the Landorus and then finish it off in the following turn. So, will Kevin's Zacian be able to move this turn or not to push this to a game 3 is my real question right now.
Yeah, you really have to hope, right? Alex has gotten pretty lucky early on, especially that crit earlier, so he has to hope his luck runs through. And Kevin has to hope that his work runs through as well. The Behemoth Blade here from Alex will go most likely into that Landorus slot, which it does. That will be enough for that knockout there. You just have to hope for this full paralysis. Alex probably has his fingers crossed. Oh, and the Rocky Helmet damage. How could I forget? So the Rocky Helmet is actually going to be enough to knock out that Zacian there. So that Rocky Helmet means that Kevin does get this win here, because he had that really nice Rocky Helmet item on that Landorus that came in so clutch throughout both of those games.
Yeah, I wasn't honestly personally sure that the Rocky Helmet was within range, but yeah, it definitely was, and that game was already sealed before we even realized. So very well fair played from Kevin there, absolutely utilizing the Rocky Helmet on that Landorus. A lot of pressure. I did really like the Earth Power going into it. You saw that it could have gone either way, to be honest, like in certain earlier stages of the game, but being able to just go ahead, you kept the Volcarona, it was able to outspeed the Zapdos on Alex's side, even if it had low HP, but the main focal point was being able to get rid of the pressure over on Alex's side, because he had actually been able to bring out the Urshifu, which did get burned. I felt like going for the burn really puts a lot in Kevin's advantage, so it's kind of like a pseudo win condition, if you may, as if you're able to land it and get that burn off onto the Urshifu, it quite detrimentally does slow down the pressure on Alex's side.
Yeah, I think the one thing that was really tough there for Kevin was losing that Rillaboom, and if you bring it to this game, you have to make sure that it's protected, but you also, sometimes you just can't outwin a crit, and that's just sometimes the way that it goes. You can't outwin a crit, especially if, you take that Rocky Helmet chip damage and you get knocked out. That Rillaboom would have been really comfortable coming in and out of the game a little bit more. Instead, we see Rillaboom Milotic for the lead here, so very interesting. Zapdos Urshifu once again here from Alex's side.
Yeah, this does quite change the battlefield right now between these trainers, as you've got Rillaboom, which does, of course, directly threaten the Urshifu, but then again, we haven't seen much from this Milotic set, so we don't know if it does actually carry maybe an Icy Wind to try to slow down the game whilst being able to deal some very good chip damage over time. And, of course, we do have the Zapdos. If it does try to opt to go and threaten the Rillaboom, we know it doesn't pick up a one-hit KO, as it does seem to be an Assault Vest variant, but it will still be able to just chunk away a very huge amount of HP on that Rillaboom, if of course it does connect. But then again, over on Alex's side, we do have the Urshifu. Like we did mention, it is threatened by that Rillaboom, but which is why you see that Alex is actually opting to switch it out right now, maybe regain the momentum by switching into a Zacian, which does resist the grass type.
Yeah, Zacian coming in here, getting that Intrepid Sword boost. Obviously nothing on the opponent's side to lower that just yet. Zapdos goes for a Thunderbolt into the Milotic slot. Milotic is very bulky. That does just over half of its HP. Rillaboom goes for a knockoff here onto the Zapdos, getting rid of that Rocky Helmet early, but getting that static once again, slowing his Rillaboom down. Really gonna have to rely here on that grassy glide and grassy terrain if it wants to go fast. But then to help with it going slow, Milotic goes for an Icy Wind here, slowing both of these Pokemon down by one stage. So that will be helpful, especially now if this Milotic is going a little bit faster than the Zapdos, but we know that Rillaboom's still gonna be going pretty slow.
Yeah, exactly that. So that Milotic does reveal, of course, the Icy Wind, which does mean that the Zacian, even though it is at +1 of its attack, it doesn't really like being at -1 for any threats that Kevin can bring in the back. For example, such as that Volcarona. Volcarona could absolutely put that offensive pressure onto the Zacian to try to shut it down, or Kevin can even try to protect maybe any sort of slot that the Zacian will be trying to target if it does remain on the field. So the paralyzed Rillaboom is now actually going to be switching out for the Landorus to get that Intimidate drop onto the Zacian.
Yeah, that Intimidate I think is going to be absolutely huge. And then having your own Rocky Helmet on your side of the field, now that Alex has lost his, especially because we've seen how pivotal Rocky Helmet has been in this game. Substitute from Zacian coming out here, though, from Alex, so that is going to make it a little bit safer. Milotic goes for the Scald here, though, so we'll have to see if this does enough damage to break that substitute. It does not actually. Zapdos goes for that Roost here. Zapdos will regain all of its health just from being just under 50% of its HP lost there. Zacian not getting the Zacian keeping its substitute is absolutely huge because it means it's going to take an extra turn.
Well, exactly that, and the Landorus will not be able to threaten it for any sort of damage because that Zacian is at -1 of its speed, let's not forget, so that does mean the Landorus could have threatened a big chunk of damage there. Of course, now it has a substitute to contend with, so not the best situation for Alex right now. This Milotic actually putting in a lot of work as the Zacian's going to opt to go for the Protect right now.
Yeah, Protect with a substitute. It's about as safe as you can get here. Landorus goes for a Stone Edge, actually into the Zapdos slot, though. Brings it almost back to the HP that it was at before it had that Roost. But the Scald, once again, for Milotic goes into that protected substitutization. Not going to do any damage there, but the Thunderbolt into the Milotic brings it down probably just to about a third of its HP. But Milotic does typically carry moves like Recover, so it may be able to do, exactly what Zapdos did and gain a bunch of its HP back, along with Grassy Terrain and along with Leftovers.
Yeah, I think Alex does really have to address his Milotic problem right now, as it is slightly and subtly threatening his Pokemon positioning on his side of the field, because we've got the Landorus right now. It can outspeed. It is threatening to go for the Stone Edge. It was able to connect onto the Zapdos, so if Zapdos for whatever reason did want to try to go for the Roost there, it would have still been able to successfully do so due to the drop speed on its side. So Alex could maybe opt to go for a switch out right now, but then if he does go for the switch out and he doesn't pick up a KO on the Milotic, it may still be threatening with that Icy Wind pressure. So it's not going to be going down just yet. It will if it is allowed to get a Thunderbolt off onto its side. So this may even be a switch out over on Kevin's side, or maybe a reveal of Protect perhaps, as Zapdos is going to be switching out for the Urshifu.
Yeah, Urshifu comes back in here. Urshifu's not going to be able to do much damage to this Milotic, but it does threaten the Landorus here. Zacian goes for that Sacred Sword into the Milotic. That is not enough to even get the knockout, though. This Milotic is so bulky. Landorus goes for that Earth Power into the Zacian substitute there, so that will be enough to break that substitute, get it back out onto the field. But we now know as well that Zacian's faster than the Landorus right now, which is really important to know. But it may not be for long, because this Milotic goes for an Icy Wind to slow down both of the Pokemon on this side. Urshifu's not going to love that either, because Urshifu is a faster Pokemon as well, but that Zacian is going to be really annoyed, because if this Landorus can get off some moves like an Earth Power or just anything really strong in general, is going to be very annoying. And this Milotic now still hanging on, getting multiple forms of HP regeneration.
Yeah, Zacian not very happy after that turn. He wasn't able to pick up a KO with that Sacred Sword. The Behemoth Blade, of course, is resisted to my low tech right now, as you're not able to go ahead and guarantee that KO. Quite unfortunate, but like we did mention, Maeve, the icy wind pressure and the fact that this my low tech is still on the field has extended its longevity is so crucial. And Kevin's just slow playing it right now. He's got the threats in the back. He just wants to make sure that he could bring them in the right moment, as the Rillaboom is now on the field for that Landorus.
Yeah, the Rillaboom on the field probably going to take some of these moves more comfortably. Zacian actually comes back, though, for Alex. Doesn't want to deal with his slow restricted on the field while Zapdos comes back in. Milotic goes for a Scald into what I believe is going to be actually that Urshifu slot, so maybe predicting a switch out there. It does not get the burn though from the Scald that I'm sure it was fishing for. The Surging Strikes though from the Landorus into the Rillaboom's not going to do a ton of damage because it was such a great switch in there by Kevin. I think Alex is very lucky he didn't get burned there, which Kevin was absolutely fishing for.
Oh, 100% he was fishing for it, and I don't blame him as well, because it could just absolutely swing the momentum of the game even further on your side if you're able to just go ahead and get that secondary effect proc on it. So in this situation, Kevin does have fake out pressure whilst the Urshifu is on the field. So Urshifu quite annoyed to see the Rillaboom once again on the other side of the field. Sure, the grass terrain is now gone, so we do of course have the fake out that should be coming out maybe into either of these slots based on if there's going to be any sort of prediction of any switch outs on Alex's side. But Milotic just doing Milotic things. Landorus is in the back, so the Milotic can easily be switched in for that in anticipation of any sort of Thunderbolt coming out from the Zapdos, trying to get rid of the nuisance of which Milotic has been for Alex's side. So in this scenario, on Alex's side, I feel like you can maybe try to go and guarantee a KO through the use of close combat, whether that be on the Milotic or maybe try to wind down the HP on the Rillaboom. But we'll find out in a bit as Fake Out goes into the Rocky Helmet Zapdos.
Yeah, that Zapdos, though, not going to be able to do anything. The Icy Wind, once again, from this Milotic, slowing down the Pokemon on this side, does a ton of damage, actually, to that Zapdos with that super effective typing, and then slows the speed down on both of these Pokemon. Did not fish for that Scald burn there either. While there is the Surging Strikes here from the Urshifu, either of these Pokemon are going to take it fairly comfortably. The Rillaboom takes it better than the Milotic, of course, but it is, and it's just going to take it to under half of its HP, but without that grassy terrain to gain that HP back, that does put Rillaboom at a disadvantage because it is so slow now with that paralysis.
Yeah, and at this point, Surging Strikes did target down the Rillaboom there. That may have been a potential read in anticipation of perhaps a Landorus coming in on that slot, or even a Volcarona if it is in the back, which I doubt in this situation, as Milotic has been so good right now. And I feel like, personally, Alex trying to go for the KO onto Milotic also would make sense, because it has been such an issue, but then that would, of course, grant Kevin momentum if, for example, a Zacian would be coming fresh onto the field, which would, of course, be highly threatening. The Zapdos picking up the KO there, and then slowly whittling down that Urshifu through the use of the Rillaboom switching out, perhaps.
Yeah, the Urshifu swaps out here, though. Zacian coming back in for it. I'm almost curious if this Milotic now goes for a helping hand with this Rillaboom at its side with the speed changes based on those icy winds that it's gotten off, but we'll have to see. The Intrepid Sword boost here comes out, and the Protect from the Zapdos, so Zapdos won't be taking any damage. Milotic actually goes for the Scald into the Zapdos slot, does not get any damage off or a burn there. Rillaboom goes for a Grassy Glide actually into that Zacian slot, doesn't do a whole lot of damage. It's not very effective there, but these Pokemon are once again on the field for another turn. Milotic is still gaining that leftovers HP.
Yeah, and the leftovers just proving to be so good on Milotic right now. As long as you're able to protect it from any sort of threats from, for example, a Rillaboom over on Alex's side, you're able to just do quite well with it, because you just further extend the longevity of it. And in this situation, the Zacian will be able to move first. There is no grass terrain on the Rillaboom side, so we do see a switch itself out now for the Landorus. Get that Intimidate drop and maybe bring the grass terrain in a future turn back.
Yeah, and this Landorus, knowing that it has that Rocky Helmet, just makes it such a rough target to go into, unless you're that Zapdos with that Thunderbolt. Milotic actually goes for the Protect here, just once again gaining some HP, gonna be a little bit more careful. Zacian goes for the Behemoth Blade, will go into that Landorus slot that Rillaboom was in. Gonna do a pretty hefty chunk of damage, but it will take that recoil from the Rocky Helmet, and is not even half of the HP for Landorus there, especially after that Intimidate. Zapdos once again goes for a Roost, so a very slow game from both of these players as the Zapdos gains up back over half of the HP that it once had. And now, you know, it's just a slow game. It's a lot of positioning, a lot of being careful, trying to get that last big move off.
Well, exactly, and Alex was able to capitalize with that roost there. You regain so much HP for little cost, as the Landorus did switch in there, of course, but the Rillaboom wasn't threatening at that point, so you can afford to do that, as we do see the Zacian now switching in for the Urshifu on Alex's side.
Yeah, and the Zapdos goes for a Protect again, another one from this side, and it is not able to get any big moves off. The Landorus goes for a Stone Edge into that protected Zapdos, though. The Milotic once again goes for an Icy Wind, gonna at least slow this Urshifu down, which is not gonna be too big of a problem. Actually, it gets the Avoid there, so no Icy Wind to speed drop, which is gonna be rough, I think, for this Landorus. This Landorus is now not in as safe of a position as it was, even if it does have that Rocky Helmet recoil.
Well, exactly, because right now the Urshifu can checkmate the Landorus and pick up a KO, so quite huge, that Icy Wind there, which would have put that Landorus in a position to outspeed. But then again, in this scenario, I feel like it may not be as important, as the Landorus should still be able to safely switch into a Rillaboom, unless, of course, the Milotic opts to do that instead. And we may even be able to see a Zacian be brought in here at some point, because I think Kevin just has to try to reposition himself a bit here in order to once again regain the momentum, because Alex currently right now has been putting on the pressure. The Milotic is being threatened to be put within a 2-hit KO range if there's any sort of double up.
Yeah, actually, we don't see a switch out here from this Landorus, so the Urshifu going to get a free Surging Strikes off into this slot. Will take Rocky Helmet damage once again, but I don't believe that it'll live more than 2 of these Surging Strike hits right here. So it is not going to be able to take 3 Rocky Helmet recoils, but still does a decent chunk of damage here. And then the Zapdos will probably end up going for some sort of really strong electric type attack into this Milotic, knowing that it has that Thunderbolt, but instead the Icy Wind comes out first, just due to those speed drops here from the Milotic that Zapdos really hates taking. Those Icy Winds, though, it is not very comfortable to take. But this Milotic, we know it has no double target moves, right? We've seen all 4 moves now, and the Zapdos actually goes for a Roost here, so it is not even going to go for something like that Thunderbolt onto this Milotic. You know that this Milotic doesn't have Recover. You know it's got Icy Wind, Scald, Helping Hand, and Protect. So you know that it can only regain HP from those leftovers, and you know it can't hit both of your Pokemon at once.
Yeah, well said. That is exactly the scenario. So the Zapdos does feel very free to go for the Roost there. Regain full HP right now, as this is what the Zapdos wants. This is what Alex wants for his side of the field. If there is any sort of focus down on the Zapdos, there is always the threat of Static. Static is so bad if you are a Zacian and you're trying to be able to whittle down this Zapdos as best as possible. Fully paralyzed, adds the status, and of course does half the speed, which is crucial in this matchup, especially since Alex does still have a lot of resources on his side of the field, so he's able to slowly whittle down Kevin's side right now. The Milotic is still on play, ladies and gents. It has been for a very long time during this game 3, so I think being able to try to shut that down right now may be a better priority slowly for Alex's side of the field.
Yeah, but if I did see what I thought I saw, we might have a couple of really interesting mechanics going on here. Urshifu switches out for the Incineroar, which will, with that Intimidate, proc the competitive on Milotic and give it that +2 special attack boost, but it will most importantly drop the attack of that Zacian. And that competitive, of course, giving it that +2 attack boost, but if it goes for something like a Helping Hand here with this Zacian, it's going to be very different. Zacian goes for a Behemoth Blade, so there is no Helping Hand. So if this Milotic went for any attacks, they're going to be much more powerful. This Behemoth Blade into the Incineroar does about 1/4 of the HP there, not a huge amount of damage because it's not very effective. Milotic actually went for the Scald here into the Incineroar with that +2. That is enough for a knockout, so a really nice double target there. Not going to have any more issues with Intimidate or Fake Out on these teams, but the Thunderbolt from the Zapdos will go into the Milotic. That is not enough to knock it out. That Milotic barely hangs on.
And that, ladies and gents, is how you turn a game's momentum completely flat on its head. You're able to go ahead and just try to shut down that Zacian. You don't want it to get any sort of free substitute or any sorts. You want to try to guarantee, focus down on it, either break the substitute there if you can, or try to get a burn if not. And it just worked so well for Kevin there. He was able to just pick up that raw KO onto the Incineroar due to that competitive boost given from the Incineroar actually switching in.
Yeah, and of course, I think, knowing, I'm sure Alex was very, very attentive to the fact that he was swapping in Incineroar into that Milotic there, thinking that maybe if he could get that knockout, that Milotic, it would be a pretty safe trade. If you lose that Incineroar, you at least get that last Intimidate off when you can, and then maybe have a chance later for something like a fake out. But instead, that Zapdos going to swap out for Alex's own Zacian here, so it could be a nice chance for some sort of really strong attack. The Intrepid Sword boost, of course, from the Zacian on Alex's side, but the Zacian on Kevin's has a close combat into the Urshifu. It is not enough for the knockout, though, and we'll have to see. This Urshifu should be faster right now than this Milotic because it hasn't been hit by any icy winds, and it is, so it goes for the close combat into the Milotic, which does not live that hit, so that Milotic now not able to use that competitive boost for another turn.
Yeah, and that is not what Kevin wants to be seeing right now. He was really hoping that the additional base power powered off from that close combat, rather than a Sacred Sword, for example, would be enough for that situation. He was very well aware that if the close combat would have come out from that Urshifu, it would have been directly threatening that Rillaboom and picking up a KO there. So that's quite unfortunate for Kevin, just missing out on that damage count. And this completely goes ahead and maybe giving this advantage straight back into Alex's favor, as the Zacian on his side of the field should be able to check this Rillaboom as long as he's able to manage his board position correctly.
Yeah, the Urshifu actually swaps out here for that Zapdos, which is back at full health. Zacian goes for a Protect here. Not going to want to take any damage. This Zacian has just been absolutely oppressive with those Roosts. The Grassy Glide from the Rillaboom does not go into Alex's Zacian. Zacian goes for a Behemoth Blade into... Kevin goes for a Behemoth Blade into Alex's Zacian as well. So no damage coming out here on Kevin's side. A really tough turn. At least he is getting that Grassy Terrain HP boost back to his Rillaboom. Yep.
Well, yeah, he is able to do that, but in this situation, unfortunately, I don't think he has enough resources. This Zapdos has been so tough for him to deal with over on Alex's side, as it's just been getting those roosts off. It's been capitalizing off of passive turns and based on board position that Kevin wasn't able to absolutely take advantage of, as we're going to be seeing him actually try to switch and change the scenario in bringing this Urshifu in, but the Grass Glide is going to be completely taking it out.
Yeah, that Urshifu, I think, just getting that sack just so that Zacian can come back in, get another Intrepid Sword boost. Zacian here for Kevin, getting a Behemoth Blade off onto the Zapdos on Alex's side. We'll have to see exactly how much this does. I know we've seen it earlier. It does about a quarter of the HP here. Zapdos very comfortably handles that and goes for a Hurricane, which hits onto that Rillaboom, so that will be enough to knock it out. So Kevin's Zacian is going to be facing Alex's, which will have one more attack boost than Kevin's does. And that is going to be a really tough ask, I think, knowing exactly how much that Behemoth Blade did to the Zapdos as well.
Yeah, and that looks to me, Maeve, like it's GG's, as the Zapdos cannot be stopped. It cannot be messed with. Even if you try to go for a Behemoth Blade right now, or any sort of, let's say, close combat from the Zacian side on Kevin's side, you're not able to do much, because it can just roost all of that HP straight back up and threaten you with any potential static ability procs. Full paralysis, of course, as we do see both Zacians opt to go for the Protect, and Thunderbolt doesn't mind. It's just going to go for the roost and try to waste out this Zacian's PP on its Behemoth Blade, perhaps.
Yeah, and if Alex knows, he's like, if we have to go to timer, I can go to timer. I can keep healing up the Pokemon on my side, and this Grassy Terrain won't last forever. It shouldn't come down to that, I do believe, because, the Pokemon on Alex's side can probably do a pretty hefty chunk of damage with that Thunderbolt, and even with something like, a Sacred Sword or a Behemoth Blade onto either, onto Kevin's Zacian there, just getting that last bits of HP down. There isn't a whole lot left in terms of this game, for Kevin to, we know that his Behemoth Blade only does 25% to the Zapdos. That's a 4-hit KO. He doesn't have the time for 4 turns.
No, he really doesn't. As you notice, the yaw time is just clocking down to 35 right now. Alex is just trying to slow play it, make sure that timer is still available for himself, wanting to guarantee any sort of roost, perhaps, as we see the Zacian on Kevin's side, not enough to pick up the KO on Alex's Zacian, and this may be it, ladies and gents, as Behemoth Blade is able to target down Kevin's, and oh my lord, picked up the KO!
That is how important that Intrepid Sword boost is, folks. Getting that extra attack stage. That means that, that means right there that Alex, after a very slow, very tactical game 3, has won this set. that is, incredible gameplay. You have, when you're working slow, sometimes you have to pace yourself. You have to take a step back, and if you're like, in his brain, he could be like, I could just fire off Thunderbolts with my Zapdos and maybe win, but he knows he's in a better position if it does go down to timer, if he takes those roosts and he handles, getting as much HP up, keeping 2 Pokemon alive, especially knowing that there cannot be any more Intrepid Sword Boost, there's no more Intimidates, any of that from Kevin's side of the field, and taking out that Milotic was absolutely huge because that thing was just such a wall sitting in front of the Pokemon on Alex's side.
It really was. And I feel like Kevin was just trying to find that path in trying to break the Zapdos eventually, because I feel like Zapdos was such a key player here. Whenever it had low HP, it just got it back up with the Roost. So you just being able to regain HP and allow yourself to replenish your resources up against your opponent is so vital when it comes to this situation where not a lot from Kevin's side could just take down this Zapdos, and we saw the results of that, of course, as it was gonna be probably the last Pokemon standing, but of course its partner Zacian made sure it wasn't and joined it into this overwhelming victory for Alex versus Kevin there, and being able to just skyrocket Spain into the next week too.
Yeah, absolutely. An absolutely incredible match, but played by both of these players. And we've had some awesome matches all day. Costa, it has been a pleasure to commentate with you. This has been a great weekend. We will be back on Friday of next week. Once again, there is no Victory Road Spanish stream right after this. So it will just be right from here. That will be the end of it. But I do want to give a big thank you. Once again, this was the Victory Road World Cup of Pokemon VGC stream sponsored by El Gato. So have a great weekend, everybody, and enjoy playing the rest of your World Cup matches for week 3.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you.